any time to influence the discussion or the voting of the board on any question relating to the matter giving rise to the conflict of interest. And they go on to specify some exceptions. 5.4, with the exceptions of matters potentially affecting a board member's terms of employment.
Tone of the voices,
that is a conflict.
And I lay
voting
there
on
with
matters
my
that will have an
finger
effect on a broad group, students,
and if
staff,
my kids
faculty,
come and
by a member
try
of
and
that
take
group
the
is in
remote
general
away
not
from
a
me and
conflict of
change the
interest.
channel,
For
I
example,
quickly
student
wake
members
up
of the
and I
board
tell
may
them to
vote on
back
issues
off.
dealing with tuition fees.
And
If
then
a
I go
board
back
member
to
is in
sleep,
doubt about whether he or she or
it
another
really,
member
it
of the
just
board
must
is
go all
or
into
may
my
be in conflict of
subconscious.
interest,
I don't
the board
sleep
member
through it
should
all,
discuss
but
the matter with the chair. The
the
chair
drone
may
of the
rule a
voice,
board
the tone of the
member
voice,
to be in conflict of interest
you know,
with an issue before the
uh,
board. And there's sanctions for breach of
makes me sleepy.
confidentiality. They have
know,
to
to
sign
a
an annual
degree,
statement disclosing any real
but not to
potential
the
or
point
apparent
where
conflicts of
I
interest,
don't want to hear
acknowledging that
what's
they
being
read,
said.
understood the board procedures on conflict of interest, and so on. So there is a fairly exhaustive procedure for board members to follow in terms of declaring conflict, real or apparent, a mechanism to deal with them, and a strict prohibition against voting on anything that affects one's terms of employment.
With
so
it being this
the
loud,
objections that
it's
are raised
amazing,
so
really.
casually here by government members with the $42 billion
not to the
budget
point
and
where
the powers of
my kids can
research that
change
they
the channel.
have and the
How does that make any
126
sense?
people in the communications department and God knows how many in research. That's the best argument that they can come forward with here. Completely and totally fallacious. Completely and totally wrong. Really unfortunate. The minister, I hope.
See, I'm laying down, I'm not saying anything, so I'm getting comfy, cozy.
Bill,
and I'm
but
like,
so far there doesn't seem to be any basis for it.
It's like a drug.
So,
what do you need to rest?
Frankly, Madam Speaker, these particular amendments are unnecessary.
Bruce must be getting tired. He's been dealing with the other side there ever since they got in because, you know, he came in right after
are completely contrary to the
Joy
lived experience and the reality of what's going on at college and university boards with their codes of conduct,
Jenny Kwan,
their
right?
extensive
And then after that,
mechanisms for
you know, the
dealing
next
with
election,
conflict
Bruce
of
came in,
interest.
small handful
those
of
sections of
NDP
the
came
bill,
in, and he's been there ever since.
I
So
certainly
he's a real
will
trooper.
be voting against, and I look forward to the committee stage, should we ever get there, to hearing the minister's justification for these draconian pieces of amendments to statutes that are functioning perfectly well. Thank you.
I thank the member and recognize the member from Kootenay West.
Thank you. I too rise to respond to Bill 18, which has some acceptable legislation in it. I think the changes to the Architectural Act, the Architects Act, which was interesting. It's been requested by the Architectural Institute of BC, but the other changes that I find concerning, the ones that amend the College and Institutes Act, the Royal Roads University Act, and the Universities Act, well, those weren't requested by the very people that it affects, which is an interesting concept. These amendments would ban certain institutions' employees from serving on boards of governors, prohibit elected board members from serving as chair, and allow the board to remove the elected board members by 2/3 majority vote. Now, I want to talk about the college in my constituency, Selkirk College, and how this legislation will negatively impact it. Selkirk is represented by both myself and the member from Nelson Creston, as she mentioned, and actually it's also represented in the Boundary Country by the member from Boundary Similkameen. It's a large area that this college covers. And Selkirk began in the hearts and minds of citizens who shared a common vision of providing access to high-quality post-secondary education in the West Kootenays. And Selkirk's roots can be traced back to 1964-65, when discussion and community forums culminated in a regional vote in favor of funding British Columbia's very first regional college. The official opening of Selkirk occurred in the fall of 1966, when the classes, although it was temporary, were in old bunkhouses provided by Selkar, the local pulp mill. They had been used when the mill was being built. The community was ecstatic about the new community college. Local students could now do their first 2 years at Selkirk as opposed to leaving the community to go to the Lower Mainland. And they could actually do some post-secondary education right there in our communities. I know my husband was among the batch of the first charter students in the arts program, and he went there for a few years before he went to University of Victoria. And my mom was also a member of that charter class because she enrolled in a Russian language course that was offered to the community, because it was truly a community college, one that had the concept of both post-secondary education, but as well as educating local adults to continue their upgrading, their learning opportunities. So Selkirk was named for the local mountains. Selkirk College was Selkirk Mountains. And they surround the college. It's an incredible site. And those of you that have flown into Castlegar, you're well familiar with the respect and awe that we grant to the Selkirk Mountains. Now, the Minister of Education is well aware of that airport. This main campus, it sits on the confluence of the Columbia and Kootenay rivers. And again, it was the very first college ever opened in this province as a community college. And many of our trades programs that began or in continuous operation in this college, they began in 1964. And that facility then was called the BC Vocational School in the Nelson branch. It was the very first institute in BC to do this, to do the trades training, and it officially became part of Selkirk College in 1975. Now, at the highest level, Selkirk College is governed by a board of governors, just like all colleges in this province. And in '94, this board adopted the policy governance model to guide its operation. And under this model, the board focuses on issues and activities that the board considers its responsibility and depends on the president's staff to deal with all operational matters. Therefore, while the president is responsible for day-to-day operations, the board's governance focus is on the long-term vision and purpose of the college. And I think that bears repeating, that the board's governance focuses on the long-term vision and purpose of the college. And what this legislation does is it eliminates a key voice in that process. It takes away the potential opportunity for faculty, staff, and students, all very key members of this organization, from having a voice when developing the long-term vision and purpose of the institution they attend or work at. You know, Selkirk is the West Kootenay Boundary Region's only post-secondary institution. And I know as a local person and as an alumni student, we're really proud of Selkirk's 46 years history of success for learners in our community. Now, I think that the board members take this very seriously, their government's role very seriously. Now, I know that during, just a few years ago, it was 2005, they adopted a best practices framework, and they thereby renewed their commitment to effective policies, practices, and public disclosure. And every year, they go through the same process. They review their strategic foundation mission, they look at their value statements and strategic directions of the college, and if required, they adjust these to meet changing needs and times as they differ. And again, we have to ask, this is really important work that is being done by the board, and it needs to be done with the voices of students, faculty, and the staff who've contributed to the college's development since the early 60s. Their voices need to be there when the college board is determining these visions. You know, we're very lucky at our college. It works well. The board members work together. They work in collaboration with each other.
Well, that sounds like goodwill.
It's interesting that
sounds like a nice place to be.
Appointed board members that are appointed by the government, and they're appointed from our community, the wide community. They have one elected staff member, 2 elected student body members, and 1 member elected from the faculty members. And what the legislation will do is it allows the board, with a 2/3 vote, to remove elected members from the board. So we have 8 appointed members, 4 elected members. Those 4 elected members can be removed from the board with the vote of appointed members, appointed by the government. So with the government, it seems like it's an attempt to subvert democracy by including this amendment in this legislation. Now, it says that board members must act in the best interest of the institution. And if it's deemed by this vote of 2/3 of the members that the board is not doing so, a board member can be removed by an order of council. Well, when 2/3 of the board is appointed, it again begs the question, of where is the democratic process. The concerns that board members might not act in the best interest of the institution is really rather insulting to the hardworking, committed volunteers who are board members. I don't know too many people who get involved with organizations like local colleges without wanting to ensure the best interests of that institution are paramount. And I did have some input from various folks in the community, and one that summed it up for me was, and I'm quoting, "It seems to me that the Act is going against a history of faculty being able to have representation of their own choosing, being involved in the running of the college at the board level. It also appears to presume that faculty association executive members, because of their obligations as executive members, will not act in the best interests of the institution. This certainly goes against the spirit of a collegial model of running an academic institution. The ability of the majority of the board to gang up and get rid of a minority board member through a 2/3 vote also appears to be a way to stifle discussion and dialogue at the board level. In a democratic system of choosing a board rep, surely it should be up to the voters, rather than the government-appointed members, to decide whether the representative is acting in the best interests of the college. Presumably, too,
yeah, there's an ulterior motive going on with this appointed board with colleges and stuff like that, whether it's financially related or whether it's somehow connected to Occupy Wall Street and the infiltration of what the so-called psychosis mind is afraid of, or I really can see where this is going, and I think it is a stiflation of independent voices that, especially if they got elected and they're up against an appointed board that's been appointed by a government that has a history of landslide,
personal attributes,
passing of legislation. Even though they put up with the debate, at the end of the day, we know that there's not going to be too many amendments, if any, and they're going to pass the bill as is, and it's going to be business as usual.
Appreciation of the responsibilities to the public. Able and willing to raise
22 seconds
potentially
here.
Controversial issues in a manner that
I
encourages
got some other things I
dialogue.
have to do with my camera.
Flexible,
This is
responsive,
like
and willing
10,
to
15
consider others'
uploads.
opinions.
I'm just going to do them back to back to
Capable of a
back. It
wide
might take 2
perspective
days,
on issues,
but that will give me
ability
some
to
time to do
listen
some
and
other
work
things.
as a team member,
And
no
we'll
direct
just
or indirect conflict
one
of
day at a
interest,
time,
the
eh?
member's responsibility to the organization, strong reasoning skills, and able and willing to fulfill time commitment required to carry out the responsibilities, and a commitment to continuous learning about the organization and relevant sector or industry. All competencies that are expected of the board members.
Last thing you want to be
things
doing
that
is
we
losing
think
people from the
should
grid
have
that
before
are
they sit on
actually
the
willing
board.
to step up
But
to
it
the
begs
plate
again
and
the question
volunteer
of
and
conflict of interest,
participate.
or
It's
they-
hard to get
people
that in
that
our
go to
community
the-
sometimes. So,
that
if
have
colleges
these type
have
of
that,
skills
then
are
last thing
surely
you want to do is be rocking
people
the
that
boat.
should be there, that are
So
relevant to
anyway,
their-
I'm going to
their
cut this
choice
off
by
now.
the-
We're coming up
peers.
into 15 minutes. I'll give it one
It's
more minute.
interesting that the board, when they do their strategic visioning and forward-looking, it comes from all members of the board, and they value the input from the college students. The students were telling me that they take seriously the decision of who is going to sit on the board, the person who has the time and the ability to be able to work on the board, to work with people, to be able to
That's
fully
important.
carry out their commitments
Trust
to
me,
the board.
I know.
They
I
take
don't
it
have an
extremely
active board.
seriously to make sure that
My
the
board
two
is not
reps
that
they
functioning.
elect to the
Okay,
board
so
are
the
there
last thing
and
you do
are,
again, you
able
don't want to
to
be rocking the
carry
boat,
out
right?
what's necessary to be on a board.
You want to
And
retain
it's
what you
interesting
have,
itself, they say even though
not
previous
scare them
board
out of town or
experience is not
scare them out of
required,
Dodge.
It's important that candidates understand the roles and responsibilities of a member of a governing board and have the necessary experience and demonstrated skills
Anyway,
to enable them to
peace out, members.
contribute to board decision making.